What are we doing in the black community? The number one consumer of a Mercedes-Benz
It's us.
us. The number one consumer of a Gucci and a Louis Vuitton, us. And they don't even advertise. Why is it that in the black community, we are always the number one consumer, but we're not the number one creators?
So you just said it, the fact that there's consumers and creators. For so long, we assume success based on consumption.
Yes, indeed. Welcome to Closing Gap Podcast, Truth About Black Wealth. I am your co-host, Mr. Eddie Richardson, here with our host and owner of Hamilton Wealth Advisors, Mr. Wilbert Hamilton. And you are tuned in WATV 94.9 on your FM dial. You're also finding us on YouTube at Closing the Gap, The Truth, as well as anywhere that you listen to and stream podcasts. You find us at Closing the Gap Podcast, where we strive to give you the truth about black wealth. And how you doing today, Will?
Yeah, I'm blessed and highly favored.
Amen, amen. And we're coming to you with another righteous and holy podcast today. And this title of this podcast today is going to be entitled, Put in the Work. Put in the Work. And this is our Father's Day edition. We did Mother's Day edition.
Yes, sir.
Right. We gave the mothers their credit, their props, their thanks, for their labor of love and caring for us, nurturing us, and all the many things that they do. Mm-hmm. Right. And we would be remiss if we did not, especially as fathers.
Yes.
Means and fathers that as we're, coming up on Father's Day, that we wouldn't do a show geared around wealth management and spirituality that includes the fathers and lays out a groundwork for fathers. And so in the title of this episode is Put in the Work, centered around Matthew 9:37, where Jesus said that the harvest is truly plenteous, but the laborers are few. And we want to stick with that same thing that we've been talking about. Last week, we talked about having a harvest mindset, about reaping. But in order to have a harvest mindset, you have to put in the work.
Yes.
You have to do the work. And who is the person that we usually see put in work? Well, it's dads, right? Yeah. And we're not saying that mothers don't work. If you go back and listen to our Mother's Day podcast, we gave the mothers all their props and credit for the work and the labor of love that they put in, all right? So we don't want anybody getting into the comment section, sending us notes saying, well, y'all just acting like the fathers are the only ones that work. No, we are not. We are just taking the time to give appreciation to the fathers for the work that they do. Because everybody that's listening knows the joke about Father's Day, right? That everybody goes all the way out for mothers on Mother's Day. But on Father's Day, we usually just get a tie or a pair of socks.
Like they always say,
underwear.
Mama's baby, daddy's baby. So the thankless job, of a father.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So we want to give these fathers credit. And as we lead into the show, Will, let's first of all, I think let's just talk about what does it mean for us personally being a father, and I'll let you go into yourself. What does it mean for you being a father?
Being a father means everything. Mm-hmm. I take it, with a great deal of pride, and joy that comes out of being a father. I'm happy to be a father. I'm thankful to be a father because I had a father, and I had a father that means. Can't say means, the world to me, and it's been there for me, from the beginning, up until now, being a 43-year-old man. I've been blessed to have my father, here, guiding me, even with sometimes without words, just in his actions. Mm-hmm. I learned, what a man was and how you carry yourself, conduct yourself, and how you treat people.
Yes.
And treating everybody with respect and, being kind to everyone. And he's the one that, taught me and told me, you take care of people, people take care of you. Mm-hmm. He instilled in me the way I work with my clients, by default, by the way he handled, kids as a, teacher and a coach and telling me that, people don't want to know how much you know till they find out how much you care. Mm-hmm. And, and that's one of those things that stayed with me, obviously, throughout the course of my life, and I implement on a daily basis in my job now, in my career, with really, pouring everything that I have, into the people around me, in the, seeing the pride and the passion in which he cared for and loved for his family, and how he was always been there for his family. So for me, I've been blessed to have what I consider, the greatest man in the world outside of the Lord Jesus Christ, to have as a father. So I've always been, highly, highly thankful, respectful, and, really one of my goals in life has been to make my father proud. That has been, that's for me, it's an ongoing battle, to make my father proud. And, of course I can sit back and realistically think, and my father's told me he's proud of me, and, and I know that he is, but it's still, and every day I wake up, I want to make sure that I honor him by making, the name that he gave me, which is also his name, making that name proud and sending that name, further and further into the history books and the record books, and leaving a legacy, because he left one for me, and he's created one for me. I'm just piggybacking off of the name and reputation that, that he's created, because I'm truly a believer that, a good name is far more valuable than silver and gold. And I was blessed with a good name because I have a great father who's, treated people with respect and dignity throughout the course of his life. So, I'm highly, thankful, and I hope that, everyone strives to be the kind of father that, my father was. I strive to be that same father that my father is, and want to continue to push that forward and, pass that on to my sons. And hopefully they have the desire to continue to push it further and further, and to be the men that, we see. But they always say, to be a man, you got to see a man. And I was blessed to see a man, a great man, and a great father.
Amen. And myself, what it means to be a father is definitely, like you said, everything. I definitely enjoy fatherhood. I enjoy having a family. I enjoy being able to have conversations.
Yes.
Being able to see how my daughters do certain things that I did, and seeing the image of myself in that way. And that gives me joy. And then also being able to give them leadership and guidance, for me personally. And then I got that from my father. My father, thank God he's still alive. And, he taught me the basics and the foundation of the things that I know, and helped me become the man that I am today, right? When it comes to spirituality and being a preacher, pastor, it was my dad that, taught me, sat me down, read the word of God with me at the table, and I saw him preach the gospel. I saw him lead in churches. But even with, outside of, the God side, also from the business side, right? He always was going to put in work.
Yes.
It's one thing that he was going to do. He never was lazy, never was going to just stay in the bed, still doesn't, right? He's going to get up and he's going to find something to do, some type of way to be active in society, some type of way to be able to earn his way, earn his keep, right? And that's still within me to this day. That type of grind, that type of hustle, that type of work ethic, is what I take pride in being a father, is demonstrating that, because that was what was demonstrated for me.
Absolutely.
Right. When it came to, doing the barbershop, growing up in a, rural town, Linden, Alabama, but my dad, opened up a spot for me to cut hair in, and then when we finally moved up here to Birmingham and opened up my own barbershop, man, I could tell how proud my dad was when we opened up the shop, because he would come up there almost every day when we first opened, right? He would come up there almost every day, and he would just do little things all around. You know what I'm saying? He would get the broom, sweep up, and he'd say, hey, make sure you keep the area out here clean. Make sure it's all about the presentation, right? And so him doing those things showed me the type of pride that he had in seeing his sons being successful and doing something, demonstrating and exercising the lessons that we learned from him.
Absolutely.
In that way. And so that's that's what I enjoy myself, and I'm thankful that I have and had and have that type of example as a father for myself. So let's go here, Will. Let's talk about, we laying the premise for this, right? Around, laboring, work, right? As fathers, there's Matthew chapter 9, verse 37, where Jesus calls for the laborers of the field. And so if we go, I want to go spiritually first, right? If you don't mind. Let's talk spiritually first. When it comes to finances from a spiritual aspect, I believe that while Jesus was saying that the harvest is plentiful, the laborers are few, that also ties into what we've been talking about on the podcast the last few weeks, is about planting seeds and having a harvest mindset on last week. But in order to do so, you have to continue to do the work, right?
Absolutely.
And we talked about, the scripture that tells us, hey, you will reap if you faint not. And what are they talking? What's the fainting part? Well, it means that don't give up on putting in the work.
Absolutely.
Don't quit on the plan that you have. And so fathers, I believe, demonstrate that type of burden.
Yes.
That, hey, in order to get something, you got to give of yourself. You have to labor in the vineyard. You have to labor and put in the work in whatever you are striving to get benefits from. And so when it comes to family, in order to have a good family and in order to have kids that grow up and be respectful, in order to have finances there, the father has to labor in the family. The father cannot just disappear and think that everything is going to be okay. It's not there, but no, he has to tend to it. He has to have his hands on it and be able to manage these things. And so the father has to lead the family in faith, right? And so we call God our Father, right? And we do so, why? Because we believe that a father keeps his hands on us and protects us and leads us and guides us in things, right? And that's what we have to do as earthly fathers as well, is to do that same thing spiritually, putting in that labor around our family and keeping our family honed in and protected and pushing our family in the right direction.
You know what's funny? When I think about, of course, putting in the work, and I think about my father and all the work that I had to put in growing up, and he would always tell me, you ain't working hard enough. You ain't working hard enough. You can work harder. You can give more. And, you don't understand what that truly means, until you get a little older and you realize that it's always another gear that you can tap into. And there's always another level that you can get to. And it's that labor and putting in that work and just really getting to a point where you learn to not focus on the reward, but you start to just focus on the work. You get so lost in the work that the reward actually changes. The reward becomes the process. The reward becomes the steps that you have to take on a daily basis that are the foundational elements that create the reward. So a lot of times, what I've learned as I gotten older, I can appreciate it more and more. The value of having a plan and doing planning is by the time I get to the end destination, is not the actual goal that I started with. I may have wanted to achieve a goal of buying a house or buying a car, or we all have a goal of trying to attain maybe saving a certain amount of money. But really what the reward is the habits that you've created along the way by continuing to wake up and put in the work on a daily basis and becoming disciplined and structured and doing what's necessary over a period of time to actually accomplish that goal. So now when I get the house, I don't just see the house.
Okay.
I see the work that was put into getting the house, but also now I've learned something about myself that, I do have what it takes. I can go a little further and do a little more. Now I see what the benefit is, and the value of doing it is, of course, the end goal and result. But really the putting in the work is really the gift, because now I've built myself up. I have the armor of God, so to speak, around me because I've been diligent, in my walk on a daily basis, of whether it's staying in that word and making sure I'm prayed up and making sure I'm feeding my family that word, making sure that I'm, saving on a constant basis, making sure I'm paying my bills on time, making sure I'm doing all those things that create the good habits that allow me to accomplish the goal from a material and a worldly perspective. Right. But really the gift that I've received is in that consistency, is in that discipline, is in that learning to love the work. See, those are things that even as a father now that I'm trying to impart into my sons. My father had me working not just for the work and the reward, but to get me to a point where I fell in love with the work. See, if you fall in love with the work, the rewards will always come, regardless of what area of life you're in. If you can fall in love with the work. Our biggest problem a lot of times today is, especially when you're young, kids look at the work and they see the labor, they see the pain, they just want it quick, fast, and hurry. We live in this microwave society where we know we want it hot, fast, and now. We want to take that time and put in that work, but not understanding that the gift is in what comes from the work. It's the preparedness that you have. There's a process of, you want to get stronger in the weight room. And there's a process you have to go through. You don't just wake up and you can bench press 135 pounds and just wake up and you can bench press 400. There's a process you have to go through because your body has to develop to be able to handle that weight that you're trying to put on your chest. See, if you can only bench 135, and you get up on the 400 pounds and you try to hold it, well, everything in your body's going to collapse. Your chest is going to collapse. Your arms are not going to be able to hold that weight. But as you plan and prepare, and as you are diligent in that weight room, so to speak, and you're building those muscles all around, you're strengthening everything along with, your mental capacity and believing that you can actually lift that weight. So there's a mental block that goes along with not just a physical block of things that you want to accomplish. And learning to love the work eliminates a mental barrier that a lot of people have of, can I do it? But when you put in the work, you have a belief because I've done what it takes to get what I want to have. So now I actually deserve this because I put in the work. But now that translates into every area of life. The things I'm trying to teach my sons now that my father, of course, instilled in me as far as putting in the work, those things are going to translate not just into basketball or football or baseball, but it's going to translate into them being men. And when they got to go on the job and they have to persevere. And, every day is not a great day, but I still got to wake up and put in the work. Daddy wasn't happy doing a lot of things that daddy has to do. And we understand that now. There are a lot of things that we have to do as fathers that are thankless jobs, so to speak. But we can do those jobs with a smile on our face because we understand what doing that job is going to bring and how it's going to benefit my family. And one thing I've learned is that and how much your sons and daughters are watching you. See, as a child, I can look back and remember watching my father, and you learned a lot more by watching than you do by talking. So my father would always tell me, watch, twice as much as you talk. So I've always was raised to be seen and not heard. So you go in, you be observative, you watch, you learn, you listen, you bring it in, you digest. Now you can utilize the information, to your benefit and understanding when to speak. Not just what to say when you speak, but it's also a timing thing of when to speak, and a tone in which you have to speak, little things as far as just shaking the man, looking him in his eye when you talk, those little things that are lost, that are instilled in you by your father, standing up straight, sticking your chest out, being proud of who you are as a man. Those are things that we learn from our father, and just, we have to, kind of go back to that sometimes and remember, because these are things that we're passing on to the next generation. So understanding how we are consistent and diligent in the work and not complaining about the work. See, I think if I complain about my job and how much work I got to do, what do I expect my sons to do when it's time for them to go to work and it's time for them to, train for basketball or train for football or do some extra studying for a particular class? If all they hear is me complaining about the work, then what are they going to do? They're going to complain about the work. But if I learn to love the work, if I'm passionate about the work, and I'm so caught up in the work that it don't even feel like work, and I don't even talk about it like work, it's just a process of what's necessary to be successful, those things can pass on to my son because now they see the rewards. So now we emulate what we see. And I want my sons to emulate
what they are seeing
and put in the work.
Yeah. So that is so work ethic is a seed.
Absolutely.
That gets planted. That's the work you put in, the work of planting that seed into your kids in that manner. And then that seed grows through us as children. So when we come back, we want to dive in a little further about the type of risk that fathers take with planting those types of seeds like you just spoke about. See you back after this commercial. Welcome back to Closing the Gap Podcast, Truth About Black Wealth. I am your co-host, Mr. Eddie Richardson, here with our host and owner of Hamilton Wealth Advisors, Mr. Wilbert Hamilton. And Wilbert, as we just, before we went to commercial, you're talking about, that putting in the work and laying that into the children and letting your kids see and being fine with the journey of the work, right? And we close out talking about the work ethic being a seed that you plant in there. And we want to talk about the risks that fathers take when we do these types of things. And I think it's important to talk about risk because as we're on this podcast and we're talking about investing from a spiritual aspect, right? That's what we mainly talk about every week when we come to the people on the radio and they see us on YouTube. We're talking about, financial planning from a spiritual aspect, right? We want to make sure that you have your spiritual foundation with God through Jesus Christ laid because we believe that that's the only way that you're going to be successful in a financial plan and successful in anything in your life, right? Some people may differ and think otherwise, but here, that is what we promote. That is our belief. That is the way that we live. And that is the foundation that we stand upon in everything that we do as Eddie, as Wilbert, and here on the Closing the Gap podcast. That's where we believe that the truth of black wealth is foundationally in God. But let's talk about this. Talk about risk, right? And anytime that you are trying to put forth a vision in something, right? When we talked about, financial vision is basically what we've been talking about all year. We hadn't termed it that way, but laying out a plan is laying out a vision for what it is that I want my money to do and how I want it to have an effect on me in my life, right?
Yes.
That's being able to cast a vision. And first of all, we believe that you have to have a spiritual vision.
Absolutely.
And the reason that we promote God in this way is because God looked out into the darkness, into nothingness, and spoke everything into being, right? Meaning that God had vision, and we are children of God. And as fathers, we are to be the servants of God in that same way. We have similar principles that we guide ourselves by based on what God has done. And so God can cast a vision when everything else is dark. And fathers have to do that same thing when it comes to spiritually being able to lead and guide our family when we're in dark times and nobody can see the light, but also financially when you don't know which way to go, we have to lay out the roadmap for our children and for our families. So let's talk about how our attitudes toward risk also impact our children's attitudes toward risk, because risk is involved in investing, right? It's a risk involved. So let's talk about that for a moment, if you will.
It's always risk and reward. And how much of either are you willing to give and take? I definitely tell people you start off and usually a little bit more conservative as you learn things. And then you gradually get more aggressive the more comfortable you get with understanding what you're doing. So, and I always related to, kind of the pressure that I kind of put on, just say my kids, so to speak, because as a parent, as a father, I understand the value in the work and they don't. I understand what I'm trying to build and create. They don't. So I'm willing to push a little bit harder. I'm willing to push you to what you think your limit is and possibly break you because sometimes things have to be broken in order to be put back together correctly. If I don't understand what real work is and my job as a father, that how I see it, and, to each his own, my job is to prepare my children, my sons, for the point in time in life when I'm no longer here. You can say much the same about your finances. The plan and the preparation that we need to do, the comfortables that we have to get used to with saving, with being disciplined, with sacrifice. Those things are necessary to plant those seeds, till that ground, create that harvest. So now I have a financial surplus when the rainy days come. My work ethic that I need to impart into my sons is necessary in order to guarantee their success. Now, it's uncomfortable. The process is. We want the process all too often to be smooth and, we want it to feel good. And, now everything is, we want it comfortable, but growth is uncomfortable. When you're working out and you're trying to get stronger, there's a thing called growing pains. You go through some pain. We talked about it before. If you started working out, that first day back in the gym, you're going to wake up, you're going to be a little bit sore. Those muscles going to be a little bit tight. You're going to have to go through a process and fight through the fatigue and the soreness in order to see those muscles develop and see the progress that you want to have physically. Well, with our kids, they have to learn that when it comes to hard work. Most people are not born naturally just being the hardest worker in the room. Most of us have to learn to work. Now, we may have the ambition and drive and have a goal, but then the parent or the adult, the father, needs to help instill the work that is going to take to actually accomplish that goal. Because we all think we're doing enough until we see somebody who's actually done what we're trying to do, and they tell us, you're not doing enough. You need to do more. You need to do more of this and less of that, because we always lean into doing things that are comfortable for us. We don't lean into things naturally that are uncomfortable for us. But guess what? Your growth is in developing and taking your weaknesses and turning those into strengths. So for me, I know personally, I had to do a better job of learning to budget better. That was an area of weakness. So I have to kind of get that in check because I'm a compulsive shopper. I love to shop and enjoy myself, and I'm a emotional shopper almost, you would say, but I had to learn and discipline myself and learn to be more controlled in learning that it's okay to reward yourself, but it's just when you reward yourself. You have to plan and prepare. I've had to save, I've had to create, I've had to do certain things. So now I can reap the benefits at a future point in time, but not just because you feel like it. So my sons have to go through a process of, guess what? I'm willing to risk the relationship with them short term because I'm going to have to push them, and there's going to be some pain in the pushing, and they're not going to be happy with how I'm pushing them all the time. They may not like the tone in which I'm talking to them while I'm pushing them because I'm pushing them past their comfort zone. I'm pushing them into being who I see they could be, the same way my father saw who I could become. It's his job to prepare me and push me towards my individual greatness and to be better than what he is. Well, if he's had his time on this earth and has seen way more than I've seen, well, guess what? He knows more than I know. So he can see things that I can't. So he knows there's obstacles and threats down the road that I'm going to run into. Those different challenges that I don't see, but I need to be prepared for. So he's getting me comfortable being uncomfortable. So he's pushing me past that limit. So I'm okay with my sons being a little bit upset with me because I'm pushing them past their pain.
Yeah.
And I'm developing them. So at some particular point in time in life, when I'm no longer here, they're built, and then they can pass on that same work ethic. They can pass on that same, mindset of toughness, that same character, because what we know character is as who are you when nobody's watching? See, if I can build you up to a point where you are so focused on the work, your character would not be ever in question, because your mindset is going to be focused on getting better and pushing yourself, not on the frivolous things that go along with day-to-day activities, because you're not stuck on just the goal.
Yeah.
You're not stuck on looking at the car. You're not stuck on looking at the watch. You're not stuck on looking at the house. You're not stuck on looking at the new clothes you can get. You're so busy focused on putting in the work that by the time you actually can afford to buy yourself those things, you don't even want those things anymore. But if you wanted them, you could get them for yourself. But you've learned that the gift was in the process and learning to love the pain, learning to love to labor, learning to love the work. So you have to get that if you want to be successful, because a lot of days, today's day and time, we hear people say all the time, I want to work hard, work smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
Well, I hate to tell you, you're going to have to do both. You have to work smart, yes, but you still got to work hard. Now, the type of work you're doing may change over time. The work that I do today is a lot more mental and less physical than it used to be when I was a football player. Now I'm a businessman. I'm a wealth manager. I run a wealth management company. So most of my work is done either behind the computer or from a conference table or behind the desk. So it's a different type of work. I'm not in the weight room, lifting and squatting and power cleaning, doing all those things that prepare me for a football game in college on a Saturday afternoon. It's a different type of work, but it's still work that has to be done. I still have to burn that midnight oil. And those are the same things and the same traits that we need to be successful financially. We have to be able to sacrifice. I tell my son right now, you got to sacrifice some hanging out time with your friends. You got to sacrifice, staying up late talking to the little girls on the phone. You got to sacrifice, doing what everybody else is doing and using that time to work on yourself to get better. Because if you're doing what everybody else is doing when they're doing it, how are you getting ahead? You have to do more than. So everybody goes to practice, I tell my son. So if you're doing the same thing everybody else is doing, and y'all spending the same amount of time at practice, how much better than them are you getting? So you have to not only go to practice, but you need to have worked out prior to practice.
Right.
You need to be doing extra work after practice, because that's when you're getting ahead. So those extra 3 hours a day that you put in that they didn't, that's the separator. So that's where over time, when we talk about the benefits and value of compound interest, when we talk about the value of dollar cost averaging and putting in money on a consistent basis into the market, and day after day, week after week, month after month, you sacrifice the Starbucks, you sacrifice, the Chick-fil-A, you sacrifice, the extra, add-ons on your direct TV bill, you sacrificed, going up and not changing your cell phone plan or buying a new iPhone, and you're saving an extra $50, $60 a month, and you add that up and you're saving an extra $250 a month, and your dollar cost averaging that into the market, and you're saving $3,000 a year, and you're doing that for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, and then you look up. And now retirement is knocking at your door, but you not only have your pension from your job, you not only have your 401k, but you saved an additional, $180,000. That $180,000 has now grown into being over $500,000 over the course of 10, 20, and 30 years. Now you have received the reward for putting in the work and taking pleasure in putting in the work. So now you can enjoy that. But the one thing that you're going to pass on that's greater than the money that you're going to end up leaving your kids is actually the process in which you went through in putting in the work.
Wow. That's excellent. So that seed that you're going to put in is going to reap a better harvest than actually the work that you did in reaping the money and any of those other things. Is seeing that, hey, all this stuff, things that I've done, I have somebody that is going to follow that example.
Yes.
Right. So yeah, having those small imitators, right? These kids. So that's the beautiful thing about being a father, and I like that, Will, because what that shows is that we allow our faith to drive us, and we don't get paralyzed by fear.
Yes.
Right. And too many times in the market and investing, people don't get into the market because they're trying to time it and they're afraid. And we do the same thing even with our kids sometimes, that we don't really take the chance to teach our children what they need to know because we're afraid of, oh, are they still going to like me?
Yeah.
Right. Like you said, no, I'm risking, you know what I'm saying, our relationship short term, right? Because I'm making a long term investment in them. I'm giving them something that they don't know that they need right now. I'm going to make them uncomfortable now so that they can be comfortable later. And that's excellent, because that's what we have to do as fathers, right? We have to have that type of spiritual vision to be able to see what they don't see.
Absolutely.
You know, so that we can invest in them in a manner in which, hey, I'm putting this in you now. You don't understand it. You don't see it. But if you just stick with this plan, you're going to reap a harvest, right?
Absolutely.
The harvest is plenteous, but the laborers are few.
Absolutely.
Why are the laborers few? Well, because we give up too fast. We quit on the plan too fast because we want to be able to see it and understand it. But faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen.
Absolutely.
And so when we invest in our children in that way, what we're showing them as well is we're demonstrating faith to them that, hey, now you've trusted in what I've told you, and you reaped a harvest for it. You've gotten the benefits. So now I need you to transition that same thing from your life experience into your walk with Christ. I need you to invest that same thing into when you go into the job. I need you to invest that same mindset when you start your own business. I need you to have that same mindset when you find your husband or your wife, right? You're not going to understand and know everything that's going to happen. But if you are willing to put together a plan and have faith to walk through it, then you shall reap if you faint not. So continue to put in the work. So in that, Will, but also it leads me to another thing of understanding and respecting risk, right? That Proverbs 21:5 says, the plans of the diligent lead surely to an abundance. Meaning that I may not quite understand the risk, but I respect the risk. So the fact that I respect the risk, I'm going to honor it and invest in the proper manner that I can reap a harvest from that, right? It means that I'm going to continue to be a good steward in what I do. I'm going to follow this plan, follow it to the letter, and let it give me the harvest back. You know, I think about those fathers, and we talked similar about some fathers when we talked about, you know, Deion Sanders and the risk that he took with, you know, going to Jackson State and then going to Colorado, and then also, you know, with his son getting drafted, right, going into the draft. He took certain risks, right? Some of us may say, hey, okay, there are some things that he could have done differently. But hey, that's the type of risk that you take as a father. You put forth a vision, you have a vision, and you follow it to the letter, and there are going to be some things that are going to work just like you want them. And then there are going to be some things that don't work exactly like you want them, but you're still going to get the end result. Because what? Shador, the end result is playing the NFL. So he made it into the NFL. We look at the other parents that we see, you know, I like to look at Joe Jackson, you know, and some people, you know, some may disagree with some things that the movies have presented that he did, but overall, he gave his children, he invested in his children to the point that his children could go and he put in the work with his children, and his children put in the work that they wanted to do. Michael Jackson put in ultimate work, right, to bring forth, to show his gifts and talents, and arguably the greatest that we've seen, right? Venus and Serena, the same way, right?
Absolutely.
Just recently, a young lady, Coco Gauff, just won the French Open, right? I don't know her parents' overall story, but for a young lady to have that type of success, and I saw her father and her mother in the stands, that they put in the sacrifice as parents and understood the risk, but they weren't afraid of the risk that they were taking, because they said, hey, you know what? We're willing to take this risk because the reward is much greater. And like you said, Wilbur, the journey of seeing our child have the joy of chasing a dream
Yes.
is key in life. And so that's what we want to, tell our fathers. We appreciate you. We appreciate the fathers that are out here that are putting in the work, that are laboring for the harvest for their children. They're making sacrifices after sacrifices to make sure that their children are able to have a good inheritance. And that's what we all want to do, because we want to not only have material gain,
Absolutely.
but we also want to sustain a generational legacy of spirituality and hope. And we'll see you back after this commercial.
Welcome back to Closing the Gap, the Truth About Black Weather, of course, here on V94.9 WATV. Of course, you can catch us on all your streaming platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe, and check us out on YouTube as well. And make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And, we jumping right back into today, and I'm loving it. As we talking to the fellas today, and and one thing I want to just make sure that the fellas understand, and something I feel like is sometimes lost, is lost in our society.
Okay.
And it's really what I always say is the biggest factor and the greatest key that we need in our community. And, we talk about it on the podcast. It's in the tagline of the podcast. I tell people it's how we close the wealth gap, but it's also the one single thing my father has always given me: good, bad, right, wrong, or indifferent. It's always been the truth. My father's always told me the truth, whether I wanted to hear it or whether I didn't want to hear it. See, he would tell me when I was playing good. He was also telling me when I'm playing bad. He was telling me when I was working hard. He would tell me when I'm not working hard enough. He would tell me when I'm on track. And he would tell me when he see me when I got a little bit off track. It was always the truth about how I was doing, where I was, or the lack thereof.
Okay.
And one thing I've learned about the truth is that it's uncomfortable, but it's necessary. I have a lot of friends who didn't get the truth from their fathers. And I can see the difference that it made in their lives. I can see the fact that I got the truth. So the truth has a way of keeping you humble. The truth has a way of making sure that you keep focused on the main thing. You keep striving towards your goal, because if someone tells you you're good enough and you really ain't, you let your foot off the gas a little bit. You get a little bit comfortable. But my father always told me the truth to say, you ain't yet where you want to be yet. You got to keep going. You got to keep working. You good, but you're not great. If you want to be great, you got to do more. It was always the truth. Now, there were a lot of times in my life where I didn't like hearing the truth.
Yeah.
I tell my sons now, I tell my wife now, there's going to be a time in our sons' lives where they're not going to like me. I said, one thing they always going to do is they're going to respect me. And at the end of the day, the truth that I give them that they dislike in this moment will turn into love later on down the road. See, I love my father more now because he gave me the truth, because he gave me the real. He didn't tell me what I wanted to hear. He told me what I needed to hear at all times. It wasn't sugarcoated. He may not have said it in the most politically correct fashion, but at the end of the day, I also learned, much like life is going to teach us, it ain't how a person say it. It's the message in which you hear them say that you have to pull out, because your boss is not going to say things how you want to say it on the job. Your college football coach, your professional football coach, your high school football coach, your basketball coach is not going to tell you in what you want to hear the way you want to hear it. It's not going to be nice and sugar-coated all the time. So you're going to have to hear the message. You're going to have to develop some thick skin. You're going to have to toughen up and be able to handle the pressures of life that are going to come along with being a father. So there are some things that fathers deal with that nobody in the house deals with. There are some things that we take on, being protector, provider, prophet, and priest of the house. Well, those are the 4 P's that I believe that every man should take on in their house. And of course, we always often talk about being a protector and provider of the house, but we don't often talk enough about being prophet and priest of the house because it gets a little uncomfortable. Some truth tends to have to come out. We have to go and we have to do some self-reflection and maybe correct some ways that we have when it comes to being prophet and priest. But guess what? You prophesizing over your son wanting to go to the NBA, NFL. Are you not prophesizing over his work ethic that is going to take to get him to the NBA, NFL? Are you not prophesizing over the humbleness that he's going to need to have in order to be able to receive coaching and take direction and understand how to utilize information being given to him in order to get to the NBA, NFL? Because you don't just wake up and get there. There's some things that you have to do, some steps that have to be followed, and not just NBA, NFL, but to be the lead engineer, but to be that doctor, to be that attorney, to be that dentist, to be whatever it is that your child dreams of being. It's your job to not only put a battery in their back, but teach them how to manage those emotions while you deal with it. And that happens in how you train them and teach them about putting in the work. See, if you can learn to love the work and love the process, then you can learn to ignore everything else that's going outside of it and focus on that. So you get so lost in the process of the work that you now are oblivious to things that are going on around you, to where it keeps you out of trouble. See, I was so busy focused on what my daddy told me I wasn't doing that I didn't have time to get into trouble of things that I wanted to do because I was too focused on, well, he told me I didn't work hard enough. He told me I did this. So guess what? I'm going to show you I have to do more. So in the time where I'm focused on putting in the work, there was less time for me to be out hanging around, running around doing things that I had no business doing. So learning to discipline ourselves, but we have to be the reflection. We are the key to making sure that our families are protected, provided, prophesied, and preached over. We have to start with that first. And we have to set the tone for the family. You set your tone for your wife. You set your tone for your kids. Now, you and your wife hopefully going to pray together over the kids. Y'all going to hopefully maybe prophesize together over the kids. But guess what? It's going to be a whole lot easier for you to do that if y'all on the same page. Is she submitting to you? Has she seen you submit to God? See, everybody, you want a submissive wife. Okay, well, guess what? In order to get submission, you got to give it first. Now, you got to give that submission to God. So now he turns around and he'll bless you with a spouse that is submissive to you and she's only going to submit if she knows that you're following him. She ain't just going to follow you. Right. Because you may lead her astray.
That's right.
But she know God ain't going to lead her astray. So as long as she know that you following him, then she will follow you. That's correct. The moment you no longer following him, you might want to remember that she might not be following you no more. That's so right. We have to be cognizant of that. In the same way our spouses are watching, your kids are watching that too. Yes. Your kids are watching, how is daddy living? Is daddy working hard? Is he practicing what he preached? Like I said, you got to see a man to be a man. Well, guess what? They got to see you putting in the work too. Yeah. I can't just sit at home and be lazy and not take care of the family and then tell my sons, hey, you need to go work hard. But they're looking at me, not work hard myself. I have to be the change that I want to see. I have to be the example that I want them to emulate. So I have to get up and move when I don't feel like moving. I have to go and take them to places and do certain things and sacrifice for them. So they'll know to sacrifice for their kids one and the same. So we have to understand that, because all those things that I'm talking about that are individual personal traits translate over into your financial success. Because guess what? We talked about it before. Storms are going to happen. That's right. Life is going to come about. And how resilient you are, how tough you are is going to play a factor, because guess what? You literally had to hold down the house. You have to be the strength for your spouse at times, for your kids at times. You have to be man enough, so to speak, to handle everything that comes along with being a father. Now, if you're not prepared for that, if you haven't put in the work, How are you going to handle that? And we have too many fathers or daddies, I call them daddies, not fathers, that are not prepared to be a father because they haven't submitted. They haven't come to God. They haven't given their life to Christ, but they're expecting things to be given to them. You know, that I want that, you know, we talked about undeserved favor once before, but also we talked about, you know, putting in the work in the labor of love too. So if mama laboring in love for your kids, you know, if dad is putting in the work, all things are going to come through in the end. But if mama ain't got a labor of love she putting in and daddy ain't putting in the work, how can the kids be successful? How can we be successful financially if we're not doing the necessary things that it takes to be successful, which is consistency?
Yeah.
Consistently doing the right things over a long period of time. Consistently, like we talk about, dollar cost averaging. Consistently, you know, rebalancing the portfolio. Consistently having a conversation and reevaluating and reviewing your plan. Making sure that you stay up to date with your plan. Have you reached out and have a conversation with someone in order to create a plan if you have one? The same way that we had to come to Christ and you had to commit and talk to somebody, it's the same way. Those same habits and steps have to be taken in order to create financial success. So we just want to make sure that our fathers, you know, understand that, you know, you're not going to get the gifts and the blessings that you want to get all the time. You're going to have to sacrifice. That's just the role you signed up for. My father told me this a long time ago. When I first started working, he said, look here, don't ever count what somebody else give you versus what you give them. Because as long as you're in a position to where you can give more, you're not going to receive as much. Because if your kids can't give you what you give them, they don't have a job. They're not in a position to. If you're the breadwinner in the house, your wife is not going to be able to give you what you can give her. But as long as there's appreciation for the reciprocation that they get, then guess what? You're on the right track. And we just have to understand that and accept that. I accepted a long time ago. It's okay if I don't see the financial success that my kids see, because it's my job to create the foundation and create the establishment of wealth that they receive, but also implement that hard work and implement that discipline in them. So now they can take it and they can multiply it and grow it forward. But I have to be okay with establishing that foundation. We have to be okay with creating something and not necessarily being the beneficiary of that same something. Because where we are financially in our community, we don't have wealthy communities yet. We're trying to create and build wealth in the African American community. So we have to, someone who has to be the initiator. Somebody has to light the fire. You're not going to be able to enjoy everything that comes from the fire, but you can be the one that starts the fire, because guess what? Fire purifies gold. It purifies precious metals. It cooks food. It does all these things. But if I could just be the one to start the fire, and my sons can come along and be the ones that can purify, they can be they can cook the food and somebody else can enjoy the meal, then I'm happy because I'm done my job.
No, that's good. That's good. And in order to do so with what you're saying, Will, I think for fathers, what we have to realize is we are not perfect.
No, absolutely not.
And, you know, I think sometimes that's a hindrance to us at times, is we want to get everything right. And I think that's also a hindrance for some of the men that you said are daddies and not fathers, those that are not present in their children's lives, is sometimes it's that pressure from society that I have to have everything right, that I can't be a good father if I'm not, if I don't have the right plan, if I don't have myself together, right? And not understanding that you just need to be present, right? Be there, right? And then once you are there, that now stop trying to rely on yourself and the abilities or lack thereof to be a father. That's why we're talking about you need to have a relationship with God, because Christ is the only one that walked the earth that was perfect.
Absolutely.
And God is the only one that can give you the guidance that you need to be able to lead and do what you need to do. That's what I rely on in my journey in fatherhood. And I think that goes for parents, period. But especially when we're talking about fathers, is you must submit, as you said, Will, but submit to God. And if you submit to God, you don't have to worry about perfection. Then God will lead and guide you to do what you need to do. And I think that ties into what you said, Will, about, being the prophet and the priest of the home, right? You have fathers and they'll prophesy, as you said, over their child, and they'll say, okay, my son is going to be XYZ star on the football field, the basketball court, or, in some type of sport, or, they want my child is going to do this, do that, right? Well, in order for you to really prophesy correctly over your child, you have to plug into the source of all prophecy.
Absolutely.
As I stated earlier, God in the beginning looked out into the vastness of the deep, into the midst of the chaos of nothingness, and spoke the earth into existence and created life out of nothing, right? And we must stay plugged into that source if we are going to be able to cast a vision, to be able to be a prophet over our family, over our children, and over the things that we have. The prophet only speaks from what the prophet hears from God. The prophet does not speak on his own. Throughout scripture, the prophet only is able to say what he says from God. And if the prophet says something that is not from God, guess what? He's a false prophet.
Exactly.
Right? And so we want our fathers to be true prophets. So plug into the source of God to receive the word that you need to be able to be the father for your family. And don't try to be perfect, but just rely on the inspiration of the Holy Spirit that can come down from God. And then, as you also said, like being that priest, and that's what leads us to now being a priest, right? Now, biblically, the two are different, right? But as a father, we have to do an all-inclusive role, right, in the household. And so when we talking about priesthood, what does that mean? The priest is the one that would receive sacrifices on behalf of the people and take those sacrifices to God to be able to cover the people, that they can live a life that was without sin, right? And not without sin, but to cover their sins that they had committed. This priest is the one that will go to God on their behalf. And so as fathers, what we want you to do as well is to be that priest. Means that, number one, you're going to make some sacrifices, and not just for yourself, but for the sake of your family.
Yes.
And then in making those sacrifices for the sake of your family, that means that you have to constantly stay in the face of God. See, the thing about the priest was the priest could not leave the temple. The priest was always working. The priest was always in the face of God, right? Because the people were constantly coming into the temple and praying and making sacrifices to God. The priest was always continually in the face of God. And so when you say being the priest of your home, that means that as fathers, we must constantly stay in the face of God. Why? Because that's where we receive our strength.
Yes.
That's where we receive our direction. That's where we come out strong once we come out of the face of God, right? We receive strength, we receive empowerment. I think about Moses, when Moses came down from the mountain after he had been in the face of God for 40 days and 40 nights, that the people, the Israelites, couldn't even tell who he was really. He was shining. He was like a light, you know what I'm saying, being in the face of God. And so that's how fathers we have to be as priests. We have to go get in God's face. And then when you come out, you're stronger, you're strengthened, and God will give you every single detail that you need to be able to guide your household. That's what God did with Moses, right? God wrote the 10 Commandments and gave them to Moses to take down to the people. So we don't have to concern ourselves when we are lost, don't have direction. If we just go into the face of God, God will write out every single direction that we need to be able to get done what we need to get done. God has done it before and he'll do it again. He will do it with us if we are willing to be present and not try to be perfect. And so also in that, that's what it comes down to wealth managers as well, is that God is a God that is not just concerned about your spirituality. God is the one that guides every aspect of life, right? God is the one that creates wealth.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So the reason that we do what we do here on Closing the Gap podcast and telling you the truth about black wealth is that we know that God is the source and the strength of our lives. That what we do cannot be done if God did not lay God's hand upon it and ordain us and anoint us to be able to do what we're able to do. And we are trying to convey that to you, that in every aspect of your life, you need to center yourself with God. So we want our fathers to be encouraged, to be strengthened. We want those people that didn't have fathers in their life to realize that God is a father to the fatherless, that all you have to do is get in the face of God and he will lead and guide you, and he will fill that empty void that you have where you did not have a father. Fathers, don't try to be perfect. Be present. And guess what? We'll see you back on the next show.